The night was thick with smoke and the distant echoes of gunfire. The sky was dark, pierced only by the occasional flare from artillery shells. She moved cautiously along the cracked dirt road, her boots sinking slightly into the mud with every step. Her hands were steady on her rifle, her senses sharp. Years of training had taught her to expect the unexpected, but nothing could fully prepare her for what was about to happen. She was on a routine patrol near the forward lines, tasked with keeping an eye out for enemy movements. Most nights were tense but uneventful. Tonight, however, something felt different. The air was heavy, charged with a kind of quiet that made the hair on her neck stand on end. She paused, scanning the darkness with her night vision goggles. That's when she saw him. A soldier pinned down in the open, bleeding from his leg. He was barely conscious, trying to crawl toward cover, but failing with each attempt. His uniform was torn, and the mud was already mixing with the bright red of his blood. The enemy was closing in, their silhouettes faint in the shadows, moving with deadly precision. She didn't hesitate. "Hold on," she whispered to herself, sprinting toward him. Her boots pounded against the ground as adrenaline surged through her veins. She was trained for combat, trained to follow orders, trained to survive. But this wasn't about orders anymore. This was about saving a life. She reached him just as the first shots rang out. Bullets whipped past her, shattering the dirt around her feet. Without thinking, she threw herself over the soldier, using her own body as a shield. Pain shot through her arm as a blade grazed her side. She ignored it. She couldn't stop now. She had to get him to safety. The enemy soldiers were closing in, sensing an easy target. She rolled to the side, dragging him along the rough ground. One of them lunged at her with a knife, and instinctively she twisted, countering the attack. Pain exploded in her abdomen as she felt the cold steel pierce her flesh. She gritted her teeth, refusing to cry out, and struck back with all the strength she could muster. Another stab, then another. 7 times in total, the blade tore through her body, leaving trails of burning pain. Her vision blurred, her strength faltered. Every breath felt like fire in her lungs, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She had to save him. The soldier under her was groaning, his eyes half closed, and she whispered words she barely felt she had the strength to speak. "You're going to make it. I won't let them take you." Time became a strange thing. The sounds of gunfire, shouting, and the distant roar of explosions merged into a single, deafening roar in her ears. She felt herself fading in and out of consciousness, but she clung to the soldier, dragging him inch by inch behind a crumbling wall that offered some cover. By the time medics arrived, she was slumped against the wall, her uniform soaked with blood. Her hands trembled, and her breathing was shallow. She barely registered the medics shouting her name, calling for a stretcher. Her focus was still on him, the soldier she had saved. She watched as he was lifted and carried towards safety, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. A silent understanding passed between them. She had given everything, and he had survived because of it. They lifted her onto a stretcher, and the pain hit her all at once. Her vision swam, and darkness threatened to overtake her. She could hear voices around her, shouting instructions, but they seemed distant, muffled, like they were underwater. She tried to respond, to reassure them she was fine, but the words wouldn't come. She was barely holding on, her body screaming in agony. As they loaded her into the evacuation vehicle, she thought about how close she had come to not waking up. 7 stabs, countless bullets whizzing past, and yet here she was, alive. But alive didn't mean unscathed. Her body was broken, and her mind was racing with every possible scenario. What if she hadn't made it in time? What if he hadn't survived? The ride to the field hospital was a blur. Every bump in the dirt road sent shocks of pain through her body. She clenched her teeth, forcing herself to stay conscious. She had to. She had to see him safe, had to know that her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. She thought of her family back home, of the people she had trained with, of the soldiers counting on each other in ways civilians could never understand. In that moment, everything else faded. All that mattered was survival. When they reached the hospital, she was rushed into surgery. The medical team worked quickly, assessing her injuries. 7 stab wounds, they said. Deep punctures through muscle and tissue. Blood loss was severe, but she had survived. Somehow, against all odds, she had survived the night. As anesthesia threatened to pull her under, she thought one last time about the soldier she had saved. She hoped he would live, hoped he would walk again, hoped her actions had made a difference. And with that thought, she drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, unaware of the next morning's surprise. The Marines who would soon arrive at her door, ready to honor the courage she had shown in the darkest hours of the night. The night had tried to break her. Pain had tried to take her, but she had refused to give in. And though her body was battered and broken, her spirit remained unshaken. This was just the beginning of a story that would soon reach far beyond the battlefield, a story of bravery, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds between soldiers. The first light of dawn seeped through the small window of the field hospital room, painting the walls in pale gold. She stirred slowly, the pain in her body a constant, dull reminder of the night before. Every movement sent sharp jolts through her wounds. Each stab wound, aching like fire under her skin. Her hands trembled as she tried to sit up, but the nurse gently pressed them down. "Easy. Don't move too much," the nurse said softly, concern etched across her face. "You've been through a lot. 7 stab wounds is nothing to take lightly." She nodded weakly, her eyes drifting toward the window. Her mind, though exhausted, was already replaying the events of the night, the soldier she had saved, the danger, the chaos. She had survived against impossible odds. Somehow, she had dragged herself and him through hell and come out alive. But now came the waiting for answers, waiting for news, waiting for the realization that her life had changed forever. A sudden knock on the door startled her. She squinted, trying to focus. The nurse stepped aside, and through the open doorway, she saw them, a squad of Marines standing at attention. Their expressions were solemn yet respectful. Something in their posture told her that this visit was not casual. One of them, a tall Marine with a stern face softened by the hint of a smile, stepped forward. "We've heard about what you did," he said, his voice steady. "We wanted to see you in person." Her heart skipped. Recognition, honor, she didn't understand at first. She had acted instinctively, without thought for reward or recognition. Her only goal had been to save a life. Yet here they were, standing in her hospital room, acknowledging what she had done. The Marine continued, "You saved one of our own last night. Because of you, lives were spared. You've shown bravery that goes beyond duty, beyond training. You didn't hesitate even at the cost of your own life." Tears welled up in her eyes, unbidden. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. I just did what anyone would." The Marine held up a hand. "No, what you did. Not everyone could do. Not everyone would do. You protected him, even when your own life was in danger. That takes a courage most of us can only hope to have." He stepped aside, and the other Marines filed in. Some of them carried small boxes, medals, citations, and folded flags. One of the soldiers she had saved appeared at the back, leaning on a crutch, his face pale but determined. Their eyes met, and she recognized him immediately. Relief and gratitude flooded her at once. "You saved me," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't be here without you." She tried to respond, but words failed. She had saved him instinctively, without expectation. Now seeing him alive, seeing him stand despite his injuries, she finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had accomplished. The Marines presented her with a Medal of Valor, its bronze surface gleaming in the early sunlight. She accepted it with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. They saluted her, and she returned it as best she could, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. "You're one of us now," the Marine said, his voice low but firm. "Bravery like yours doesn't go unnoticed. You've earned your place among soldiers who face death without flinching." For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself a small, victorious smile. The pain was still there. It would linger for weeks, months, maybe years, but it no longer defined her. She had survived. She had protected a life. She had earned respect that went far beyond rank or title. As the morning unfolded, more Marines came to visit, bringing stories of the soldiers' recovery, of how her actions had prevented further casualties. They spoke of the chain reaction her bravery had set off, how her instinctive courage had inspired others to act with similar resolve. She listened quietly, absorbing every word, every story, every expression of gratitude. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about understanding the bonds formed in battle, the unspoken trust, the willingness to risk everything for the life of another. She had known this bond before, but experiencing it firsthand, seeing the Marines stand before her in admiration, it became tangible, real. Hours later, after the initial visits ended, she lay back in her hospital bed, finally alone for a moment. She thought about the night, about the danger, about the fear and pain she had endured. She thought about the soldier she had saved, about the Marines who had come to honor her, and about the path that had led her to this moment. Her life had changed irreversibly, but she felt stronger for it. In that quiet room, she made a promise to herself. She would continue to fight, continue to serve, continue to protect. Not for medals, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. She had faced death and survived, and now she carried a deeper understanding of what courage truly meant. Later, as she began physical therapy and the slow road to recovery, she was visited by letters and messages from soldiers she had never met. Stories of her bravery spread throughout the unit and beyond. She became a symbol of courage, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, one person's actions could save lives and inspire countless others. She healed slowly but surely. The scars on her body were permanent reminders of that fateful night, but they were also symbols of resilience. And every time she looked at the medal pinned to her uniform, she remembered the soldier she had saved, the lives she had impacted, and the Marines who had shown up at her door to say one simple, profound thing: "You are one of us." Her story became legend within her unit, not because she sought fame or glory, but because she had acted without hesitation when it mattered most. And in the hearts of those she had protected,